Can you do a side to your
Okay, good morning everyone. Thank you all so much for being here today. Today we're going to be doing a workshop over the importance of student discourse in the classroom. And this is something that when the school administrators, DIs, principals got together, they really saw as something that the district really wants to focus on in the 2016-2017 school year. And student discourse might seem like it's a pretty straightforward thing, but a lot of teachers aren't sure how to implement student discourse in their classrooms or even what student discourse is. So the purpose of today is to define that for you, give you some ideas of strategies you could use in the classroom pertaining to student discourse, and give you some time to actually plan some lessons involving student discourse in your own classrooms for the upcoming school year. So the very first thing that we have to do is make sure that we know exactly what student discourse is, or you can't incorporate it into your classroom. So what I would like you to do is on your desks, you'll see little sticky notes. If y'all will each take a sticky note, and on your own, if you don't have any writing utensils, I have some pens and pencils and there are markers up here, you can come grab one. On your own, take a minute or two to think of your own definition of student discourse. There's no right answer, there's really no wrong answer. Just what does student discourse mean to you? And if you will write that on your sticky note on your own, and then we will discuss. Write what you think. There's no right or wrong answer. Just what do you think student discourse means? Did everyone have time to do their definition? Okay, great. So go ahead and with your partner or group, share your definition with them. Compare your definition, see maybe what it has in common, what it doesn't have in common. Just go ahead and share those definitions with your groups.
My definition is students.
I said it was just collaboration between students.
I said student involvement and so they both of our definitions are centered around students, obviously, and it's the doing work.
Okay.
Students working.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to come to a consensus definition as a group here. So, would anyone like to share some of the main points of you or your partner or what y'all discuss together? Yes, Kelly.
We put students doing work in the classroom, some type of rigor or taking ownership or engagement in the classroom.
So let's write engagement. And then I heard rigor. And would you maybe say we can summarize that as student-centered?
Yes,
maybe,
absolutely.
Okay? Okay, great. Thank you so much. And group over here, did y'all have anything that y'all would like to share about your definition of student discourse?
Teacher-led, as
Okay.
I've called this, getting the students on the right in for this sort of course.
Okay, so getting students on the right course. Okay, so teacher-led to get students on the right course. Okay, anything else that y'all want to share that you want to add to our little definition of what we think student discourse might be?
I put taking ownership. Students
Okay.
taking ownership in their learning.
Okay, awesome. Okay. Do you think that there is any specific format? Did any of y'all talk about different formats that this might take the shape of? Okay. Anything else that we want to add to our list? Okay. So what I want y'all to do, and you can do this either in your partnerships or if all four of you want to discuss it, go ahead and use the definitions that you have and what we wrote up here as our main points, and let's come up with a definition that we can agree on as a class on what student discourse might be. So tweak all the definitions, we can kind of synthesize them together as far as what student discourse might be.
So do y'all think it's more student-centered or more teacher-centered? Have y'all heard this term before?
I've never heard
Student-centered.
this
Well, she said that it's teacher-led, student-centered, so the teacher's a guide, and the students are actually going through, collaborating, and
teacher-led, what was it, activity?
Teacher-led lesson that focuses on student-centered activities.
Okay. Okay. I think that's a great definition to start with that we can definitely work off of. Some other ones, when we were doing this with other groups and other classes, some other ones that were developed were content-driven, meaningful student-to-student discussion. When students engage in meaningful conversation over a topic with the goal of deepening their understanding of the content. Conversation wherein students use academic vocab to challenge each other and scaffold for rigor to deepen understanding. So I think it'll definitely have a lot of the focus on the students, and that's absolutely what it is. It's focused on the students, definitely has to be teacher-guided, teacher-led, but a little bit more than just any activities, they're really looking to incorporate student discussion, and that's what discourse is really talking about. They want the students to be discussing. Now they can use a variety of activities wherein they're discussing, and we'll talk about those a little bit later, but they're really focusing and honing in on, can students use academic vocab and terminology and talk to each other to deepen their understanding of whatever the content of that class may be. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay, so we came up with our consensus definition. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to read a little article on student discourse, and these are yours to keep, so if you would like to write on them or make little notes or jot down questions or anything like that, please feel free. And we're going to kind of chunk this up instead of reading it all at once. What I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you read the first two sections, and we're going to get a little chart that looks like this. Each section on the chart corresponds with a section in the reading. So you can take notes or jot down keywords or questions or aha moments, whatever really stands out to you in this chart, you can go ahead and jot that down. And then we're going to stop after the first two sections so you can discuss with your group or ask me questions, and then we'll move on from there. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, so we're reading and jotting down aha moments for the first two sections right now. I'll put on a little background music while we do this. some of you getting close to finishing, so there's no rush. Please take your time reading. But when you and your partner are both done with the first two sections, go ahead and compare what you wrote down, ask any questions of each other that might have come up while you were reading, share important aha or light bulb moments. So that's when both of y'all are finished. You can go ahead and start having those discussions.
I've had that understanding. Every part of our daily life, remembering feelings, understanding it, what's et cetera.
The first one, the aha thing that I saw was
How we think and process. And what about for
I've had, if like have students talk to one another, change their goals, I now teach you how to say things, speak, the time to engage with one another, and
Yeah.
our talk.
Yeah, language is
I don't remember the actual
As I was like kind of taking notes, we put imaging photos of speech, which goes
Yeah.
into thinking, which is kind of cyclical.
I just kind of gave a rundown of what it started off with, what we kind of changed to.
And so
So it
I
was
was drawing on
teacher-centered,
the thing, and then I was like,
kids would
it's
punish if they
the
talked,
thinking and the
and they
thinking,
had
and
to
so to
memorize
me,
each
it's
side,
cyclical.
and then it just became more student-led,
I hadn't thought of
and
it.
encourages use of feedback.
And so classrooms should be
Cool.
filled with.
What was standing out to y'all over here?
thinking. On the second one,
We liked how why
as
it's important,
instructional.
so it makes you actually pay attention
Yeah.
and
As
to
the
other
teacher,
persons
and
and
the teacher.
talking and language is actually how we think and process things.
From our understanding of daily things, we have that T like books, et cetera. And some of our things stood out to me was like, can't remember the exact wordage, but the
Never did that.
becomes sign language.
No, it's not.
Yeah. If you, I know that you and I talked about when you hang around someone long enough, sometimes you start picking up the phrases they say or the mannerisms that they have, yeah. And I know me personally, like if I think something, maybe I'll forget it, but if I say it out loud, even if I have to remember, like if I'm telling myself, like, remember to do something, if I said it for whatever reason, sometimes that helps me remember
One
it.
student at a time is talking while the others listen or ignore the class. And the teacher doesn't see that. And so, to me, putting them in pairs or groups of three.
Once you've had your discussions with your partners, make sure you add to your graphic organizer. And let's go ahead and share as a group, because I think both groups had some interesting points. So we'll start with the group over here, Kelly and Sarah. Do y'all want to share some of the things that you said? And if they say something that rings a bell to you, feel free to jot it down in your graphic organizer.
Yeah. Yeah, so on the first one, Sarah mentioned how animals can think and image, but as humans, we process verbally. And so by speaking, that creates a hierarchy that we're better than the animals. As I was reading, I saw that the imaging goes into the speech, which goes back to the thinking, which goes back to the imaging. So to me, it was a very cyclical process that humans take, and how important speech is in the learning process.
Right, and it can definitely be a cycle, I think, in your classroom. I hadn't really thought of it like that, but definitely every time you start a new content or even a new lesson within the content, I think that's a really great way to think of it and maybe help your students think of it. Or I know at our school we're real big on content posters or strategies on the wall. You could even make a little poster to remind the kids about that cycle. I think that's awesome. What about group 2, Gillihan and Justin?
I think we talked about why it's important because it is part of every single part of our daily lives, from our memory to our understanding of things to even to our feelings, and how we process everything. I think that's what we took away from that first part of that.
Anything else? Okay. I know when I was coming around and talking to y'all, we were talking about how when something that was impressive to point out from that reading was how if you listen to someone's academic vocabulary, sometimes it becomes your own, or even just their vocabulary in general. And I know that I've hung around with people and all of a sudden phrases that they use commonly pop up in my own vocabulary, and I don't know how that happened, but it did. So if their peers are using it, if their teacher's using it, and then they are being forced to use it, it will gradually become a part of their discourse as well. Another thing that stood out to me when I was reading that was the conversation with the teacher and the student. That stood out to me as something that a lot of teachers, I think, would think that is successful discourse. You're getting one student to talk back to you and to participate and answer the question. And while that might be good for small bouts within a lesson to make sure students are engaged, that strategy of just asking one student to answer a question and it's teacher to student, that's really a better engagement strategy than it is student discourse, because you have the other 25 or 30 students in the classroom sitting there not really getting much out of that one single exchange. So student discourse is more getting all of the students to use this vocabulary, to use this terminology until it becomes ingrained in them. And I just want to point out to you too, that this activity that you're currently doing, this is me modeling for you how you could use student discourse in your classroom. You have a reading, you're breaking it up, you're chunking it for the students so it's not too overwhelming. They have a little graphic organizer where they can not just take notes, but they can jot down questions, they can write down words they don't understand. You could even have them draw pictures for your visual learners of things that they think are happening in that. And then while y'all were having your discussions, I was walking around to make sure that every group was on topic and was on task. And sure, in a big classroom, it's impossible to make sure everyone's on task, but if you walk around and you monitor, it becomes easier to make sure that they are having those conversations, that they are on task, on topic. So it still requires that element of teacher-led, like y'all said. I gave you the instructions, I gave you the materials, I monitored, but y'all were talking to each other and using terminology from the reading and things like that. So this is a strategy that you could use for student discourse in your class, even over something as seemingly mundane as a reading. Does anyone have any questions?
I have a comment.
Sure.
I thought the same thing when I was reading that conversation. I told Sarah, I said, I see this all the time in the classroom when the teachers think that they're doing the right thing and they're engaged. And I said, I pointed out from the author, he put, the students or the others listen or ignore the class. But you have no idea. If they're just staring at you, that doesn't mean they're engaged.
Right.
So I mentioned to her it would have been better to put them in groups of 2 or 3
Mm-hmm.
and let them discuss the process of the
Right,
learning.
exactly, and that's a great observation. And yeah, you might have like, again, out of a class of 25, maybe 1 student's answering the question, maybe you have 5 more who are actively listening to the answer, but you don't know how many you have sitting there, they're like, oh, this isn't my question, so I can just tune out, and then they're not getting anything from that, so yeah, definitely. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and go through this process for the final 2 sections as well, where you're reading, jotting down questions, aha moments, and then we'll discuss with our partners. So just read and jot down your aha moments or questions in that graphic organizer for now. yes, when you're done, please feel free to discuss with your partners and share your ideas, jot down any that maybe you didn't have that they enlightened you on, and then we'll come together as a group.
For building the foundation, but it said telling does not necessarily equate to learning.
That was something that really stood out to me too, because
Right.
so often we think,
I wrote it,
Yeah, yeah, that was, as soon as I read that, it was like,
bam, bam.
because
I
it's exactly.
basically said, I was about to say the same thing.
what were y'all, what stood out to you?
That's what I was like.
Questioning the student is not the only tool to check for understanding, it's really their dialogue then. It's them, receiving more information and learning.
Right. I think it's really rewarding too. I know I incorporate student discussion and debate a lot of times into my AP classes, and when you hear them come to those conclusions themselves and go deeper than maybe you even ever intended to teach them in that lesson, you're like, oh, like it's one of those proud teacher moments, because you're like, oh wow, they really get this and they get the depth of it. So. Okay, did anyone want to share as a group your aha moments, things that stood out to you, or any questions that you had over these last two sections?
We had a big aha moment, in the building the foundations, there was a sentence, I think, that a lot of teachers could benefit reading, where it says telling does not necessarily equate to learning. I think that's very powerful.
Definitely. I think so often as teachers, we want to be able to say, well, I said that in my classroom, why don't they remember it, or why don't they get it? And, some students might make sense to them, like they're a math brain, or a science brain, or a social studies brain, they're like, oh yeah, totally, I get that. But some of them are just sitting there like, okay, you said that, but I don't understand how they're connected, I don't understand that. Yeah.
As a teacher, I noticed I did that a lot, like in planning, I would go, well, let's just lecture because we want them to get the right stuff. When there's other ways to do it, there's other ways to get them that they can read. But they need to get through this fast and we know it, so let's just bam it out. And are they learning? I don't know.
I think that's especially something when I was teaching AP, that's sometimes the philosophy that I know that I took, because there's so much you have to cram in, so much depth, and you like to think that, oh, these are higher level students, so they will get it. But you have to remember that even with those AP kids, you still have some that are struggling to stay in the class, like they want to be there, they're putting in the effort, but they need a little bit more time to process, and telling does not necessarily mean learning. So this isn't just your regular level students that might be struggling academically, it's really all of your levels, definitely. What about over here? Anything that stood out to
I
you?
think something that stood out to us was that questioning is not the only way to, find out if they're, or checking for understanding and finding out if they're really understanding the material and taking it to that depth that you want them to take it to. There's other ways of them engaging, student to student and that type thing that you can check for understanding that way as well.
Definitely, and I think that some students, not necessarily all students, but some students in some classes really love to discuss and will have productive debates. Every so often you get a class that's really good at that. And they have more fun with it when they get to kind of have ownership of their own lesson. They kind of get to steer their conversation where they want it as long as they're on topic. And I think they like that freedom, and they like the feeling of autonomy and the trust the teacher has in them to kind of direct their own learning. And it makes them, I think, a little bit more interested in the topic than just, oh, we're copying down lecture notes again today or something like that.
I also wrote down more processing time. We see a lot in teachers' classrooms, there's that silence and they get nervous that their kids are gonna get off task, so they just go. And the kids never get to that processing finality. So, more processing. It's okay if your class is quiet for 30 seconds or a minute, the kids are processing. And they need that, but a good teacher would be like, no one's talking, we're not learning, let's go. And they're not ready for that. So when you said more processing, that immediately popped into my mind.
Right. Something I really like too about this is that it discussed specifically the English language learners, the ELL students, and I think at the school that I teach at specifically, we have a very small ELL population compared to others in the district, and I think that sometimes teachers forget about these kids, or they're not really adequately trained in how to teach these kids, And I thought it was really interesting that it was talking about how they need to have all the aspects of language at the same time kind of integrated, speaking, writing, reading together. And I thought it was interesting because at my building this year, we've had to, on our lesson plans, we highlight in different colors the strategies that we're going to use to help their reading, to help their speaking. And really, if you're an ELL student, this kind of hits a lot of that. They're reading, they're taking notes, and then they're talking. So they're able to kind of confirm with another student that they're on the right track. The teacher can come over and confirm with them and clear up any issues. So this could even be something that is used with your ELL students as well in the classroom. Does anyone have any questions before we move on with this? Okay. So what you're going to do now is you're going to flip over your little graphic organizer, and on the back there are 2 boxes. And in the first box, and I want everyone to do this independently and then we'll share out, but I want everyone's thoughts. So on the back in the first box, if y'all will answer the following question, or it's not really a question, but if you will complete the following sentence. So student discourse leads to academic success because. If you will complete that sentence on your own, and then we'll come together and share ideas. Most of us are done. So why don't we share out what we wrote? So we'll start over here. Sarah.
Okay. I said student discourse leads to academic success because students get practice with meaningful vocabulary that can help deepen their understanding.
Awesome. I love that you said deepen understanding, and you said that, I think you said meaningful vocabulary. I think those are 2 really critical elements for sure.
Student discourse leads to academic success because students are processing the information through language. This allows students to think about the material and learn through communication.
Awesome, and I think that's such an important just life skill that a lot of these students are so glued into their phones, they don't understand how to have a face-to-face conversation, so that's a good life skill to practice with them for sure. Justin.
It allows all of the students, or all of the aspects of learning, reading, writing, and speaking to play a role where the students take ownership in the content.
Awesome, and I love the ownership part. I think when students have ownership, they're more enthusiastic about being in your class. Julian.
Student discourse leads to student academic success because the students are processing and taking ownership with their thoughts and their ideas. Conversing is the building block of learning, so with more conversation becomes depth and understanding.
Awesome. I love the depth and the understanding and the incorporation of the vocab. I know a lot of the times when we're talking about standardized testing, we say, oh, well, we have to teach the test, But really, if we teach them the skills, they should be able to take any test, regardless of the content, and be successful. So if they are really deepening their understanding and they understand the process of critical thinking and analyzing, which student discourse can definitely help with, then that will translate to success in other classes, on standardized tests, on SATs, on really any problem solving that they have to do in the future. When I wrote my little sentence stem, I said that student discourse leads to academic success because when they use the language and have time to process, their minds go through a more critical and analytical process that allows them to understand the topic more thoroughly. So I think we all were kind of on the same track there. Any other thoughts about why it leads to academic success? Okay, so in the next box, if you will complete the sentence stem by making a list, and we're actually looking for specific activities that you could do. Now, I know that student discourse is a relatively new thing, so we are going to come together and brainstorm together, and if you want to do this in your partners, if you want to do the second box in your partners, that's totally fine. But just try to think of some strategies, some actual activities that you can maybe use in your classroom that would foster student discourse. So how can you get them talking? What is an activity or a strategy that you can do to get them talking. So brainstorm on your own or together, and then we'll come together as a group and go over some ideas. I know this is kind of new to some of us. Let's go ahead and brainstorm together in case you're getting stuck. What are some strategies that you came up with? Anyone can share.
I mentioned like a warm-up activity when you walk in the door to kind of recap yesterday's lesson or thing like that, so that they could talk and discuss kind of what they learned from yesterday, what they got from yesterday's activities.
Okay, so like a turn and talk to their partner around them. Talk. Okay, awesome.
Going off that, I learned a skill this summer where, like, if you're in a class that students are struggling in, put them in groups of 4, and they number 1 through 4, and they write on number 1 something they remember from yesterday, and then they pass it around, and they write the same thing on every sheet.
Awesome. And maybe if someone's like, hey, I don't remember number 2,
Yeah.
the kid that wrote number 2
Yeah.
could explain that to them. I
Yes.
love that. That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's a really quick activity you could do for a
Real
warm-up.
fast.
That's awesome.
And it doesn't make the kids feel like you're picking on them,
Right.
because you're like, I don't remember what all we talked about. Let's see what you remember.
Yeah.
Awesome. Any others that you want to share?
I do think pair share activities. as
Okay.
warm-ups.
Can you tell me kind of how that, walk me through like what one might look like?
Usually you have a topic up on the board and the students think about it and then they sit with a partner of their choosing, or you can choose it, and then they pair up and they share their thoughts about what that specific thing is.
Awesome. Okay. And Sarah, what was one of yours?
I don't know if this counts, but I wrote debates because we used that a lot this year in AP, and they loved it, and it was very engaging for them.
Definitely, and I think that debates absolutely count. I think in some classes where you have kids that maybe might not take part in a large group debate, you can even make it smaller, like let them get in a group of their choosing, and they still are having a debate, and you'll just have to walk around and monitor each group, but that makes sure that every student, even the quiet one in the corner that won't fight their way in to talk to the whole class, is still talking to the group of their choosing. So yeah, I think absolutely debates count. These are some other strategies. One that's not up here that I used in my class is called bracketology. It's where basically, like in the NCAA March Madness, you make a bracket, and it can be done with anything. We use it in history to say, okay, which of these events is the most important? So they have to pair up 2 events and decide which one would win and advance to the next round. And each student has their own bracket, and they kind of argue with each other about each other's brackets. Like, well, no, the Vietnam War is way more significant than the Korean War because this and this and this. And then the other student has to come back and say, no way, this one's way more significant because of this. So they're getting to argue, and it kind of incorporates a game. And so they really get into it. They really like it. And that's something that can be done in partners or small groups. And the students just love it. They love, especially if you have an argumentative class, they love to get in there and argue their point and be, no, this is the right way to do it, or this is the one that would win. So that's one that I really had a lot of luck with. These are just some other strategies, and you'll get a handout with these strategies, so please don't feel like you have to copy all these down. Jigsaw, I think Kelly, you told me you've observed a classroom where this was used. You take pieces of a puzzle, and each student gets part of the puzzle, and you kind of have to come together to put the puzzle together, and they're trying to talk about, well, I think I have the piece that means this, or means that, and then you put it all together, and then you kind of discuss what they put together, and what is this image, what does that look like. Inside outside Socratic circles are kind of similar in that students are asking questions of other students and going back and forth, coming up with the questions that they're then asking to their peers. Collaborative products and assessments. This is something that the district is really going to start pushing in the upcoming year, that students collaborate on assessments, where assessments are proof that they have the critical thinking, that they have the depth of understanding, and they want those to be collaborative. So the students work together on those and talk about what product are they going to make, what information are they going to include. Even just coming to a consensus. So like we did with our consensus definition up here. So start small, build with a partner, and then eventually the whole class going from group to group will come together and make a whole definition. Other things, just making lists, sorting concepts, doing things like where you put different pictures around the room and saying, okay, like it could even be ice cream flavors. Go to your favorite flavor of ice cream. Okay, then everybody in that corner has to discuss a question that you give them. So putting them different ways to put them in groups and giving them little stems. The sentence stems that we used on the back, that is a way to foster student discourse and a good way to evaluate too their understanding. We did those after y'all had read the articles on your own, and we brainstormed together, we had talked together, but then y'all did that on your own. Say you're doing this as an activity in class, you could have them turn that in and grade their answers to those questions as their evaluation. Did they really get it? Did they really understand after all that discourse what this is all about? Does anyone have any questions about any of these? Okay, so what we're going to do now is actually give you some time to plan how you would incorporate student discourse into your classroom. So I'm going to give each partnership a little list of talking points. And this is another strategy that you could actually use in your classroom. If you group your students together and put a little talking point activity breakdown on their table, this will help guide their discussion. So for instance, you could see, I don't have my copy up here now, but you could see in box 1, it says things like, okay, when you're planning, you have to go over these things. So their discussion would be about these things in topic 1. Oh, and then they move on to topic 2. These are the things that they have to do, so they could think about topic 2. So obviously your topic is going to be something, some content that you teach in your classroom. World War I, World War II, ancient civilization. And those talking points give you ideas of what you need to talk about as you plan that lesson. Like box 2, it talks about the environment. Whenever I was planning this workshop today, I had to figure out, okay, it's gonna work best to put us in pairs and to have everything laid out, and I'm able to walk around. So even something as simple as desk arrangement can help contribute to a successful lesson. Those talking points are something that you could incorporate into this with students as well to help guide them. So what y'all are going to do is each person's going to get this little orange sheet. On the back are those strategies that we just talked about that we can use for student discourse. So if you want to add some others that we mentioned, I think we said the think, pair, share, warm-up lists, bracketology, sentence stems. So those are just strategies that you could use. So what we're actually going to do now is, as your content teams, y'all are going to plan out any lesson. Probably one for the first 6 weeks would be a little bit more helpful since that's coming at you first. So you can plan out that lesson using the talking points, go through everything, and then when you're done planning, you're going to come get a giant sticky note, and you are going to actually kind of write out what your lesson's going to look like, what it's going to incorporate, and then we're going to put it on the wall and do a little gallery walk at the end. So by the end of the course, y'all will have ideas of other activities that other content teams have come up with that you might be able to incorporate into your class. Does anyone have any questions?
Where'd you get them sticky notes?
I think I got them at Office Depot, and I was just too amused not to buy them because they're giant. Does anyone have any questions?
No.
Okay, so y'all can go ahead and get started planning using those talking points.
Okay, so your first unit is,
So let's talk about what's for them.
foundation.
Ooh.